Live from Djerber, this is the Locktoon Podcast. I'm Amy.
And I'm Mel.
Today we're covering chapters 24 and 25 of Nona the Ninth by Tamsyn Muir. Our last episode covered the unwanted guest, which I think was kind of like the 4 to 5 seconds in between chapters 23 and where we pick up here in this episode with chapter 24. So these two chapters cover a lot of ground. Palamedes has a new look. Nona breaks a blood ward and gives a kiss. And we finally meet Kiriona Gaia, the saddest girl in the world.
Yeah, you could title this episode like reunification episode or something. There's a lot of the gang getting back together vibes here, but it's not all happy and cute.
Yeah, I feel like there's a switch where the sort of Harrow Gideon romance, I will die in the land of your whatever, is flipped, and like Kiriona's so angry and pissy, and we have instead Palamedes and Camilla. I mean, when have they not been romantic? But like just being so romantic. Whew.
Yeah. Before we get started, as always, if you want to support us, you can donate. You can buy some stickers and pins. If you want to support artists in the Locktoon fan community, you can check out our website at our Locktoon Creator Hub at locktoonpod.com/fanmerch.
Yes. And we say this, I feel like, every episode, but thank you for bearing with us as, there are long breaks between episodes. Mel and I were just talking before jumping on here, talking about how the summer is just kind of a crazy time to find overlap where we can actually sit down and record, much less like prep. And I mean, every one of these episodes takes hours and hours and hours to prep, and then many, many, many hours to edit. So it does take a while, but it's always a bit easier in the fall, although I'm getting married and Mel is moving,
and
so we'll see. Yeah.
You all have caught us in big life momentville over the past 2 years. I don't know. We decided to start this podcast the year before our lives turned upside down, so we didn't know. It's fine. This is very grounding and fun for us, and yeah, thanks for your patience.
Yeah, and again, since Electo has no release date set yet, I think we'll continue to kind of take our time, but hopefully make it a little bit more regular through the fall and winter.
Yeah. So, Amy, I know you've missed my jokes.
I have.
I'm going to share one that I didn't write. Someone named Eric wrote in this joke, and I LOL'd to it. So I'm gonna share Eric's joke.
Okay.
Amy, what does Pyrrha use as bedding on hot Neuro nights?
I have no idea with this one at all.
Just a simple duvet cover.
Oh my God.
What I appreciate is that our listeners are as corny as me, and it makes me feel seen, and I love all of you. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, wow, Eric, that was so on brand. So on brand.
Yeah. So speaking of Pyrrha, shall we get into chapter 24?
Yes, we shall. If you remember, chapter 23 ended with Camilla grabbing the handkerchief that Ianthe had said if she took the handkerchief, she would win, grabbing it and saying match to the 6th. And then Ianthe seems to sort of pass out. And then we have the unwanted guest, which filled this kind of gap in between these chapters.
Right. And we should mention that Camilla has a sword through her gut.
Yes. Yeah. That happened at the end of chapter 23 as well. So it's not looking good. But we opened with chapter 24. It seems like it's just the second after the end of chapter 23. And as soon as Ianthe passes out, all of the dead puppeted soldiers collapse. So we're seeing it from Nona's perspective, of course. Camilla has been stabbed through the abdomen, and Kiriona is kind of running to her side. Nona has been crushed by all these dead.
She's under a pile of dead puppeted soldiers.
This poor girl. This poor girl.
What's wild is that Nibirius's body kind of snaps into movement and sits up and Pyrrha runs over with her gun. She has drawn her gun out,
Mhm.
but then sees, presumably, Palamedes' eyes in Nibirius's body. And Pyrrha's like, you fucking legend. And immediately Palamedes starts tending to Camilla. And it's so interesting because Palamedes has been sharing Camilla's body with her for this entire book.
Mhm.
And now is finally separate from Camilla's body, and Camilla won't look at Palamedes at first.
Right, which I feel like makes a lot of sense because at the end of the day, it is Palamedes' soul, but it's got to be so hard to, look at this other face that is not the face of your beloved, necromancer, but know that also it is his soul. I mean, poor Camilla.
Right. It's also got to be really fucking complicated because, on the one hand, when I was thinking about this, I was like, it's kind of like when you're online dating someone and you've
Mhm.
only communicated over text and you have this great texting relationship, and then you meet them in person and it's like a little awkward at first. You have to like figure out what that dynamic is going to look and feel like in person. It might feel a little clunky. But
Mhm.
then the other thing that's happening here is that she has hinted at feeling better when she and Palamedes are one, right? In those
Right.
like brief moments where they've kind of become one. I think in the ocean or the sea kind of scene after that fight where she had one eye that was hers and one eye that was Palamedes, she talked about how good that felt. And so I also think part of this is just deeply uncomfortable for her as well.
That's a great point. Yeah, it's not like she would prefer to have Palamedes' soul hanging out in her body, but it's just that at least was a closeness. And now it's like
Yeah.
a different kind of being apart, which is hard for her.
Yes.
And Mel, the next part is I literally was looking it up because I was like, is this from something? Is this from the Bible? Because it's like so beautiful and wow. But I couldn't find anything. I think it's just from Tamsyn Muir's incredible, beautiful mind. But
Well, why don't you read it? I'm pretty sure it's like inspired by the Bible. We could talk about that. But why don't you read it? Because it's just so beautifully written.
okay. So Palamedes says, won't you look at me, Camilla Hecht? And Camilla kind of mutters something. And Palamedes says, I died and you carried me. I gambled and you covered my bet. You kept the faith and were the instrument of both my vengeance and my grace. And now I have fought through time and the river and Ianthe the First, fought and bested Ianthe the First, and I hope I never fight her ever again. Will you not look at me now, Cam, and know me? You know what, though? Actually, I think you are right. Isn't the look at me and know me from the Bible?
Yes. And I'm pretty sure. So I was trying to figure out where it could be from a few different places in the Bible, where I think it is pulled from. And I couldn't find the exact passage. Is after Jesus dies and then is risen, he encounters people that he knows and they don't recognize him. And I think this happens like 3 times or something. It's been a while since I have studied the Bible, but pretty sure this is, yeah, after resurrection and his disciples, and I think Mary Magdalene maybe like doesn't recognize him. And there's some passage where he says like, do you not know me? And then they recognize him. But I don't know where it is.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. I knew that this was giving Bible.
So it's giving very Bible vibes.
Yes. So but it's also just this beautiful romantic, just like heartbreaking thing. And Camilla says, yes, Warden, I will always know you. And I have to say that, and we talk about this all the time, Moira Quirk's delivery, these 2 chapters just particularly got me.
Yeah.
The way that she acts Pyrrha and the way that she does Camilla and Palamedes, I think is just like really, really, really good.
Yeah, totally. And Kiriona later on as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, queen, always. So, it's Palamedes. And Pyrrha is like, hey, pal, we need to find the body. She's referring to Gideon's body, right?
Right.
The key to the locked tomb.
Mm-hmm.
And so Palamedes does that thing he does where he like feels stuff and then can sense things. And he's like, well, I can't figure out the details, but if you take 2 lefts and go down this thing and over these boxes or whatever, and Pierre was like, okay, that's like, those are details.
Yeah, she's like, that's way more detail than I even needed. Thank you.
Yes.
As they're talking about this, Palamedes implies that, well, he says she's alive, referring to Ianthe, in his head, and like points to Nibirius's head. So he seems to be implying that he could have killed Ianthe, but didn't. And part of that is because he now has a lot more respect for her, but also that he thought it would be safer to kind of leave her trapped in his head. I was a little bit confused by this because it's like the choice was kill her or leave her trapped in the head, but also the alternative seems to be also like letting her wake up in her body somewhere else across the universe.
Right. So he's basically saying, I've trapped her. We have about an hour. I can't hold her off forever. Right. Not sure like what that actually looks like internally for him. But I think what's happening here, and this comes up in a little bit when Nona and Pierre are talking about souls and bodies and whatnot, is that I think if Palamedes would have killed her, her soul would have gone back to her literal body. And that would have been far more dangerous for them in this moment because she's very powerful.
Okay.
They're not sure what exactly she's capable of. So I don't know when, it's kind of like in these books when someone says kill, what are they really talking about? Do they mean just severing the mind-body connection or the soul-body connection? Because again, Ianthe is both puppeting Babs, but is also kind of like split in her body back in the ship wherever she is.
Right. Yeah. But it's interesting because Crown is coming back in when Palamedes says that he left her alive. And she thanks him profusely for leaving Ianthe alive and says like, oh, you're a good man. And it's interesting because Palamedes, like this is the moment where I'm a little confused if killing her, means killing her, like actually dead, or if it means punting her back to her body. But regardless, Kiriona is thanking him. So kind of makes it seem like actually killing her.
Right. Totally. But as with all of these lictors, they're like pretty hard to kill. So,
right.
Palamedes is a powerful dude. But like it was so hard to kill, what's her face?
Kithurea.
Mm-hmm. He like literally blew Kithurea up and she was fine. Yeah. So, I don't know. I think this is regardless. While Crown is like thanking her, Nona can read people really well. She can read truth and lies. And Nona's narrative of this is that she's looking at Crown and she's like, Crown wasn't happy at all or grateful. Mm-hmm. And yet she obviously was hungrily and thirstily grateful.
Right. She compares her to Noodle, like wanting to go outside, but also wanting to stay inside. That kind of almost like childlike indecision or like inability to really know what you want truly at the bottom of it. And I think this is just such a good distillation of Ianthe and Kiriona relationship. It's almost like Stockholm syndrome. Kiriona, there's a part of her that just desperately wants to be free of Ianthe, but also a part of her that cannot even conceive of a world without Ianthe, to the point where it's like she needs Ianthe and like loves Ianthe in this really sick and twisted way.
Yeah. This was a very good observation that Nona makes. Mm-hmm. It's so on brand for the dynamic. Mm-hmm. And so they all kind of split up. Crown goes to get Judith Deuteros. Pierre and Nona head to find the corpse, presumably Gideon's body. Right. And then Camilla and Palamedes stay up top, kind of talking in hushed voices. Palamedes trying to tend to Camilla's wound. Mm-hmm. And our storyline follows Nona and Pierre. And on this walk to find Gideon, Nona's like, hey, sorry that you might be the last to know this, but I'm dying. And Pierre has no reaction at all. She's just kind of like, yeah, I thought so.
Right. And it's really sweet because she explains that, of course, she knew that Nona was dying because a soul always wants to get back to its body. And Nona's like, well, doesn't that make you sad? And she's like, no, not at all. I'm not going to let you die on my watch. It's just, man, this chapter really.
It's like 10,000 years worth of confidence right there. You know,
Yeah.
She's like so sure of herself that she's not going to let Nona die on her watch. Which again, like, what does that mean? But yeah, Pyrrha's just as you might be when you're 10,000 years old, unfazed by much.
Mm-hmm. There's this interesting bit where they're talking after Nona reveals her big secret. And then Pyrrha starts to ask about when Nona screamed. But before she can get her question out, they kind of round the corner into the corridor filled with the blood wards, which we'll talk about in a second. But what I took from this moment is Pyrrha is starting to suspect. We've talked about whether or not Pyrrha has suspected in the past, but I think in this moment, at least to me, this is evidence of Pyrrha starting to put this together. She's actually known Alecto when she was Alecto, and I think that she has the information at this point to start to realize who Nona really is.
Yeah, totally. I think Pyrrha has suspected this for most of this time, and this just kind of adds to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. Definitely a bit of evidence of Pyrrha suspecting this, at least.
Yeah. And then they get interrupted because they've enter this hallway and there's a blood ward that's put up and there's writing. And it's basically Ianthe writing to Pyrrha being like, don't fucking come this way, right? Was that your sense?
Well, I think it's to anyone, really. She's warded this hallway heavily, presumably to protect Gideon or to not let anyone else mess with Gideon. Potentially even to like not let Gideon get out. It's unclear. Although that also might just be she locked the door. The key's still in the lock, but the door is locked from the outside.
Right.
It's interesting because she's proclaiming it. Don't go through here. I mean it, you idiot. You will disintegrate. But
yeah,
apparently she's left these blood wards all over the station. So all over the barracks.
Yeah. Hyper paranoid here. And the trap, we recognize the trap here. It comes up in the first book. And it's one of Mercy Morn's old entropy traps. So if you were to like put any part of your body through, it would disintegrate. And basically Pyrrha's like, Nona, you have to be the one to thrust your hand through this because you regenerate faster than any other being in the universe. And Nona's like, I'm afraid. And Pyrrha just kind of thrusts her hand into it. And it does. It disintegrates. It grows back over and over again, freaking Nona out. It eventually breaks the ward.
Right.
But like, ouch.
Yeah, it also makes me wonder if they couldn't just break the blood ward on the tomb this way. But I mean, whatever.
Yeah, it is curious. Yeah, it's very curious. I don't know.
There's an interesting moment right after this where Nona pulls her hand out. The ward is broken. And there's this quick passage. I'll just read it. It says, for a moment, she wanted to yell help like she had done before, pretending to be the captain. She wanted to shout. She wanted to be listened to. She wished the barrier had taken her hands. She wished that she had thrust herself into it, become that big seething mass of flesh and meat and tendrils, ruined her body, just melted it, come back messed up so that nobody could want her body but her, so that it would be hers and nobody else's. And I think this is definitely Alecto poking through. First of all, she's always hated her hands, right? That's why she decides to put her hand in. And I think this is the part of her where you have to imagine like the soul of Earth was taken out of its original shape and put into this body that had value to God, you know, and she just wanted to she just like wants her body. She like, also a lot of the reason why the world was fucked up in the first place was, I assume, the same reason our world is fucked up, you know, global warming, overusing resources, and literally like wanting the body of Earth. And this seems to be, to me, a little peek inside of Alecto's mind. She just wants herself to herself. She just wants to be this mass of herself that's so hideous that no one could ever want her, basically.
Yeah. It's sad. I mean, and the human body is so limiting compared to like what Earth had been, you know?
Right.
So, yeah, this is a bit of that anger that's poking out here that has been pretty much repressed throughout this whole book. And we're starting to get to the point where we see it. Also, we should mention that just before this happens, there is a reference that Pyrrha makes to Wake.
Right.
And we shouldn't ignore this. Nona is getting like a little bit jealous of the fact that everyone wants this other person or body, which I think is funny. And Nona's like, what's so special about this body anyway? And Pyrrha says, well, she's the key to a door that's been kept locked for 10,000 years. And personally, she's the last thing I have left of a woman I tried to trick into loving me and got played myself. And for you, she might be you, Kitty. And yeah, I think like Pyrrha is also gearing up to see this next generation of the woman that of the woman that she loved. And when she finally does see her, and we'll talk about that soon, she has all sorts of feelings that pop up for her and that Nona observes as well.
Right. Yeah. Because again, she's met Gideon, but in the body of Harrow/Nona. So yeah, what a mess. Oh, one other thing I wanted to add to the little passage that I read is when she says for a moment she wanted to yell help like she had done before pretending to be the captain. I think that's very clearly like she's getting closer and closer to being that resurrection beast that she truly is.
Yes.
But Pyrrha comforts her and she kind of shakes it off, honestly, pretty quickly. And Pyrrha says she's going to clean up the rest of the blood ward just to make sure there aren't any remnants, and sends Nona off to check the doors in the hallway looking for the corpse.
And what does she find but the girl from her dreams?
Yeah.
We have been waiting for this moment as a reader for so long, this entire book. Just speed reading through this book so that we can figure out if we're going to meet Gideon again.
Right.
And this is a big moment.
Yeah, it is. She opens one door. It seems to just be a closet. She opens the second door and sees sort of a bedroom. And in the one bed in the room, there is a girl. And it is the girl from her dream who seems to be asleep or dead or whatever. And she walks up to her and she proceeds. I mean, it's like 2 paragraphs of describing her looks, which Nona is unimpressed by. But I think it's really interesting because since we've either lived in Gideon's head or Gideon has been absent, we've never really gotten a full description of what Gideon looks like outside of obviously her hair.
Yeah, just like being ripped and has red hair, and then like the cover of the first book. But here, you know, Nona studies people. She's very observant. So it makes sense that this is the moment that we get phrases like she had a decided chin and a nose that was the complete opposite of Nona's nose. One that put her in mind of those big poison desert cats Born in the Morning was crazy about. Right? Her lashes being really dark, but short and curly. Yeah, just really, really detailed description of Gideon.
Right. Also that she has a dimple. Did we know that? Because that's cute.
I don't know if we knew that, but I'm glad to know it now.
Yeah. Gideon, and I think Tamsyn said this on her blog or something like a long time ago, but Gideon is cute. Gideon's attractive in sort of like a boyish way. Is a good looking person. But Nona really doesn't think so. She's still like horrified at the idea of being redheaded.
Right. It's like she doesn't want to be Gideon. And part of me was kind of wondering if also this was like a, I don't know, like a gender expression thing too. Because there's a difference between like, well, I don't know, in the queer world, is there a difference of like being attracted to someone versus wanting to be them? And she's basically trying to reason out how she could find the body she's currently in so attractive, but maybe her actual body is this redheaded one. And it doesn't quite match up for her.
Right.
Not that she loves anybody, but I think she definitely prefers Harrow's.
Right. Which I think also speaks to sort of the long relationship that Alecto, the body in the tomb, has had with Harrow.
Right. That's true.
So Nona reaches out to, I think, touch the hand of the girl or to just like lightly touch the girl from her dreams. And when she does that, the girl's eyes open. And they are basically the exact color of Nona's eyes, except sort of dulled and foggier, because again, dead.
Yeah. She says Gideon's eyes look like treasure at night, right? So a little bit dulled, but still gold, still pretty. And I think I had wanted, slash, I can't imagine not everyone wanted this Harrow body plus Gideon body to result in some magical thing where both of them kind of come back as their full selves. And that is just so the opposite of what happens here. And even Nona expects for something to happen between them. And nothing does, other than Gideon's eyes opening. And then it says the corpse looked at her in such mute, helpless appeal, spoke to her in her first language, that Nona did not have to think about what she did next. She leant down and laid a kiss right on that cool, dead, crooked mouth. And this is the fucked up irony. Oh my God, I'm like, we've been waiting for a kiss this whole time between these two people, and this is what we get here. This is it. And yeah, she kissed her just the once. The corpse's mouth was soft and rough and cold and did not respond to Nona's mouth, but a tremble went through the upper body. Nona was surprised and relieved to find that the corpse girl tasted like toothpaste. So ordinary.
So not dead tasting, which is nice.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
For me, this is evidence for a couple of things. First of all, Nona thinks the corpse wants to be kissed. I think that means that Gideon does, in fact, want Harrow to kiss her. Yeah. So pretty good evidence that Gideon does have romantic feelings for Harrow. And also, I know that we debated the pool scene. Did they kiss? Did they not? I feel like Gideon's reaction to this kiss again makes me feel like they did not kiss during the pool scene, because Gideon is so shocked and like just completely overwhelmed with disbelief that I just like don't think that it would be that level of reaction if they had previously kissed.
Yeah, I agree 100% with you. I was curious what you think about this. The corpse spoke to her in her first language. Does that just mean like expression?
Yeah.
The whole like she looked like she wanted to be kissed, like that's the language that Nona knows is a language of movement and expression.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, not actually spoken language, but the way that she, reads faces and bodies, and I think that's her first language.
Yeah. And so Gideon acting so shocked and disbelieving, Nona gets really defensive and is like, you looked like you wanted to be kissed, that's all.
Yeah.
And then Pierce shows up, cock blocking, and Gideon just goes to being a corpse, eyes closed, totally dead looking.
Right. Pierre arrives and then kind of immediately confirms that it is Gideon, which I guess is not really confirmed until this moment. And she says she looks just like her mom, who, as we know, is Wake. She sort of stares at her longingly, which I think is obviously because she loved Wake and Gideon looks a lot like Wake. But also it made me wonder if, Mel, remember that there was a moment where they think it's Gideon, the first, why they let Wake get away, and he says it's because he thought the baby was his. But that was actually Pyrrha talking. And I wonder if part of this is because Pyrrha for a while actually thought that Gideon was hers, which I think is like an interesting, I don't know.
Or like kind of wishes that, like she sees what maybe could have been totally outside of the reality of whatever would have happened. Right? It's sort of like how Pyrrha romanticizes taking Cam and Pal and Nona off this planet to a moon and living happily ever after on like a commune. You know, I feel like it's like that vibe where Pyrrha probably was like, oh man, there was maybe a tiny % chance that this could have been my kid, and maybe Wake and I and our child could have lived happily ever after, you know? But it was
Right.
never going to be like that.
Right.
And it's interesting here, Pyrrha says, like, talk about being the mother's daughter, and Nona's confused by this. And Pyrrha alludes to, like, Wake being the mom. You've seen her photo. And she says, Blood of Eden mass manufactured him. It wasn't even a good shot. Does that mean that they cloned Wake, or like they like used Wake's eggs to make more children? Like what did Blood of Eden mass manufacture?
Oh, that's so funny because I had the exact same thought. I was like, oh my God, they like made a bunch of Wakes. But I read it again and it just means they made that picture, that photograph. They like made a shit ton of that photograph. But that's funny because I also was like, what the hell?
That makes sense. Like that photo was not even really a good representation of Wake. That's like cool.
It's so funny. No, I thought the same thing. I was like, damn, that's crazy.
Yeah. So she's basically saying like, wow, this like that photo doesn't even look as like Wake as this kid does. And she says like she's him in the eyes and brows, so meaning God. And she also says, I'm amazed Mercy Morn didn't see it, but I guess she wasn't looking for it. And Mercy Morn kind of admits that herself a little bit towards the end of Harrow once she discovers. She's like, oh, shit, I should have seen this.
Yeah, it's interesting because Pyrrha gets it right away, but also Pyrrha is ex-cop, I guess, kind of used to seeing that kind of thing.
Ex-cop and ex-lover. I mean, when you really know someone else's body and everything about them, you know, I feel like you can pick up on stuff. And so Nona's like, oh, her mother was the woman who broke your heart. One of my favorite lines that Pyrrha says is, yes, let's not get too cute about it, though. My best friend and I punched her out an airlock. Apart from that, I was ready to commit.
Yeah.
Another complicated relationship dynamic here.
Sweet, sweet Pyrrha.
Yeah.
And Nona does tell Pyrrha that she kissed the corpse, and Pyrrha's both like, why did you do that? And Nona's like, just cause. But also Pyrrha seems surprised, just like I think you and I were, that nothing happened when the corpse and Nona touched.
Yeah. Here's what's interesting, though, is that Nona lies to Pyrrha here. Or she omits the truth when Pyrrha asks her, why did Nona kiss Gideon? She says, I just did, no reason. That's a lie. The reason was because Gideon looked like she wanted to be kissed.
Right.
And I thought Nona couldn't lie. So it's just a little confusing to me.
I think Nona can lie. She's lied in the past, just slightly, but I think it just means that Nona is not Electo, not completely.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense.
Pyrrha, it's not like she doesn't believe that Nona saw her. And in fact, she says, like, what color were her eyes? And Nona says gold. And Pyrrha says, oh, great. That means that they can't, like, show up in this body, which I'm not entirely sure why that would be, but.
Gosh, yeah, I don't know either. So Pyrrha's asking, you know, what happened? What did it feel like when you kissed her? And Nona was like, well, nothing.
She says, that's private.
Yeah. And Pyrrha's like, basically, they can rule out a bunch of things. They can rule out essentially that there's any part of the soul that is supposed to be in Gideon's body in Harrow's body, right? They basically at this point have two options. One is that Gideon's body could be a fake, which is why the soul didn't jump from Nona into Gideon's body, or that Nona just is not Gideon. And so they haven't gotten here yet. Palamedes, you know, they figure it out eventually. But right now, those are the two things that they're trying to rule out. And Nona asks, oh, like, would I have died if my soul just jumped right into that body? And Pyrrha said, you'd have tried to. I think meaning the body. Harrow's body would have died. And Pyrrha says the body needs thalurgy and a soul to keep the lights on. Anastasia's tripod principle.
Right.
Body plus thalurgy. But no soul is basically a very weird vegetable, which, as we recall, is Titiania and what's the other one's name?
Ulysses? Which one was?
Ulysses. Titania and Ulysses were basically, when God was first figuring his shit out, they were like body plus thalurgy, but no soul, which is why they were just kind of weird vegetables.
Right.
And so that's what's being explained here. And then Nona is like really feeling gaslit right now because Gideon is still appearing dead, you know? And I don't think Pyrrha doesn't believe her, but it's just like, this is weird. So Pyrrha grabs Gideon's body, throws her over his shoulder. Gideon, like, her body literally is acting like a dead body. And they start to walk back up to Cam and Pal and Kiriona.
Yeah, I thought there was a really funny line here where Pyrrha is complaining about how heavy Gideon is. And she's like, it's all this first house gear. I don't know why John is trying to dress everyone like the military wing of disco.
Yeah. Which is just a great descriptor in general for these outfits.
Yes.
Like, even without more of a description, you can kind of like imagine what that looks like. But as Pyrrha is carrying Gideon up, we get a description of what Gideon is wearing through her eyes.
Yeah, which seems to be a lot of white clothing, jacket, military stuff, but then also is wearing a jeweled scabbard with a sword hilt poking out of it. It isn't clear if it's a rapier or like a two-hander, but I'm assuming a two-hander. But also, it looks like she might have the knuckles on her belt as well.
I was wondering what that was referring to. Yeah, that's totally what it is, because it says she couldn't quite make out the other thing, also pearl white, a jumble of clear white blades and plate rivets. Those are the knuckles. Knuckle knives.
Yeah, the knuckle knives. So maybe she is carrying a rapier. I don't know. I mean, it wouldn't be, I feel like, and in fact, I think we probably find this out later in the book, so let's keep an eye out. But it would be, I think, very telling if she's carrying a rapier and not a two-hander.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so they make their way back up, and Pyrrha's basically like, can you keep up just a little longer? Because Nona is running out of steam here.
Yeah,
she's like towards the end of her life rope. And then they run into Crown, who's waiting for them. And when she sees the body, her hand goes to her black hilted sword at her hip. This is because she's carrying Gideon's sword.
Rapier, right?
Rapier, yeah. And it seems to be like, oh my God, poor Gideon. And Pyrrha's like skeptical that Gideon's the real deal. She's like, don't get your hopes up. But Corona Beth is like, no, she looks exactly like Gideon.
Specifically that she looks exactly like the last time that Crown saw her.
Right, which was when they were with Blood of Eden.
Yeah, let's not forget, I feel like this is a thing I keep on having to remind myself, but sometime after the end of Harrow, Jod's forces attacked the Blood of Eden ships that had Gideon and somehow got Gideon's body. So that's why Gideon is with God and not with Blood of Eden, which I assume would have made things, it would have been a very different book.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, they're making their way up, and Pyrrha's like, well, what about what happened to the shuttle? And basically, Corona's like, well, the shuttle's fuel is warded. It would blow up if we did anything to it. So that sucks. And also Judith is getting worse, so that sucks. So, like, you finding Gideon's body is the only good news that we have.
Right. One note here is that Coronabeth is a little confused about why Palamedes can't do as much necromancy or as powerful necromancy as Ianthe did in Nibirius's body. And Pyrrha explains that it's because Nibirius was Ianthe's cavalier and not Palamedes' cavalier. So.
Bada bing, bada boom. Straightforward for once.
Yes. And then Crown is very cute. Crown gives Nona a piggyback to the room where Cam and Judith and Palamedes are with Pyrrha and dead Gideon in tow.
Yes. And then, they come up. Palamedes is looking and he's like, what? No reaction? Asking, was there any reaction between Nona's soul and Gideon's body? And then Pyrrha's like, no. And Nona even gave the damn thing mouth to mouth. And Nona's like embarrassed about this and is like, private information, Pyrrha.
Yep.
And so Palamedes begins the work of trying to figure out if this body is a copy or not.
Right. And Crown says that it wouldn't make sense if it were a copy, or at least Ianthe definitely thought it was the real deal because she was acting like she was walking on hot coals the whole time and wasn't doing it to, lie to Crown. So it seems to be the real thing, although it doesn't really make sense that Nona wouldn't have had a reaction, at least to Palamedes and the rest of the crew.
Yes. And so then we get a full inspection
Mm-hmm.
of Gideon's body. And this is where the fandom goes freaking crazy.
I feel like it's a very specific Tumblr Reddit side of the fandom, though.
It totally is. It totally is. But we can't not mention it.
Oh,
here.
of course not.
And I have my own feelings about it. But so basically what Palamedes is doing is like he's examining the body to see, does this body have wounds or markings that are consistent with what Gideon's body was before she fell into God's hands.
Uh-huh.
So he undoes her scarf, and beneath the scarf is like a huge wound in her throat.
Yeah, like it's slashed.
Yeah, like made the neck yawn wide open.
Where's that from?
I thought it was from when she jumped on the fence.
Well, the one in the chest is definitely the fence, but what is the...
I thought maybe she got punctured a couple times by the fence.
Okay.
You know, she jumped on a fence. Maybe she landed. I don't know. That was but it could be a sword wound. It could be something else. But Palamedes seems to know about these wounds already.
Mm-hmm.
So she definitely received them, I think, before she fell into Blood of Eden's hands.
Yes, that makes sense. So if anyone out there has a better explanation of where the neck one came from, let us know. But big wound on her neck, and then there's the sort of famous wound on her chest, which is this big gaping wound from, this one's definitely from where she fell on the stake. Mm-hmm. And the sort of fan frenzy around this is that someone, I have no idea who originally started this, but they started calling it her chussie. And to the point where and this is how I know about it, I try and avoid the Reddit because that would be a whole, then I would have to cite all of my thoughts. But Tamsyn Muir did an AMA, and then someone asked her about the chussie, and Tamsyn Muir had to, kind of forever be tainted by the knowledge of what a chussie is. And
well, Amy, what's a chussie? Very
funny.
What is a chussie?
It's a chest pussy. Yeah. Yeah. It's a chest and a pussy. And
sorry, Dad.
That chest. Yeah.
If you're listening, sorry, Dad. Yeah. Yes. But like whatever, short of being a chussie, it is a chest wound.
Mm-hmm.
And it is described as big, purple, and bloodless, and with white teeth peeking out coyly from within.
Yeah, and I was confused about this because all of the fan art I've seen depicts it as like literal human teeth sticking out around it. When I first read this, I assumed it was like the ribs sticking out, but I'm not sure. I think my first impression was probably wrong, and it is like little, human or whatever teeth, but that makes it really interesting because that is super reminiscent of the weird things that are coming out of the river, as well as whatever sort of demon took over Column's body at the end of Gideon the Ninth. So either way. But yeah. I mean, either way, it's creepy. It's either like ribs sticking out like little teeth, or it's literally teeth, which is worse.
Yeah. My theory is that it is literal teeth, and it's because God did this weird ass shit where he like reached into the river and pulled Gideon's soul out to put it back in this body.
That's right.
And there's some weird shit going on in the river, right? Which is alluded to in like just a few pages. And also has been alluded, whatever. It's like a big part of what the next book is going to be about. But I'm pretty sure that is what's going on here, is God did something real fucking shady by pulling Gideon's soul out of the river, and it fucked Gideon's body up.
Right. I was a little bit confused by this too, but Palamedes says that there's another wound lower down. Is he talking about the one on the chest, or does she have another wound like lower down on her abdomen?
I think lower down.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean...
This is why I think it's a fence thing. But,
Did she get stabbed in the stomach sometime during that fight?
Yeah, maybe she did. I can't remember.
It seems like we didn't do our homework, and what we really needed to do was go and reread that fight, but truly did not have time.
Yeah. Yeah. Either way, Palamedes is like, well, if these wounds are consistent, then this is Gideon's body. And Pyrrha's like, actually, that's not true because John can copy anything perfectly. He is God.
Right.
And Palamedes says, yeah, but I've touched her when she was alive, so, like, I have an advantage. And so Palamedes puts his hand over one of Gideon's wounds and then sneezes and pulls away violently and is like, ugh, like, what is that? And Pyrrhus says, well, you just met God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Citrus taste.
Yes. And Palamedes said he didn't like him.
Mm-hmm.
And Pyrrha goes, God's preserving her, God created her, or both. Good luck seeing anything through that. His aptitude's like a punch in the nose, Sextus. Once he gets his fingers on something, you'll never find any other fingerprints on it. Too much noise.
Yeah, and this is interesting because Crown's like, well, wait, Gideon was preserved before, God got a hold of her.
Mm-hmm.
Blood of Eden tried to make her rot over and over again, which is, the things these bodies are going through.
Oy.
Yeah, but I am a little bit curious when Pal touches Gideon this way, is he feeling, I think he is feeling God because God made Gideon into his construct, but also Gideon had a little bit of that already.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why she's been preserved this whole time is because she's God's child, not because God specifically preserved her.
But we find out at the end of this chapter, right, that God has done things to Gideon's body.
True.
I think that's what Pal is feeling because Pal has touched Gideon before and has not had this reaction. So I think like this reaction literally is a result of God's shenanigans.
Mm-hmm.
So Pal's like, all right, well, let me put a ghost ward on the back of Gideon's neck so that nothing weird happens. And we got to figure out how to get some blood from Gideon. And Camilla's like, well, I can give you my blood for a blood ward. And Palamedes is like, I can use the blood that is sprayed around this room to make it, so it's fine. And I think Cam is like, oh, God, what do we do now? Let's say that we're not sure about this body, or like, I don't know if she's just saying, we've been working so hard to get to this point, and now what?
Yeah, I think it's Crown more.
Oh, it's
Cam.
Crown. Yeah. And Palamedes has this very logical response of all of the tasks that they need to do in order. And it's very funny because they're all huge, but he kind of says it in this way that's like box checky.
Yeah. Yeah. The plan as of now is find the oversight body, figure out how to use the shuttle, join up with the rest of the Sixth House, give the planet that they're on a break by luring the resurrection beast away, massive in and of itself, fix Nona, stop the war and sue for peace, and then go to the Ninth House and start the real fight. Which is funny because like basically what happens is they do check off number 1, and then they do the last thing on the list.
Yeah. Yeah. Nothing in between there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, after he says this, the plan is to try to draw some of Gideon's blood.
Oh, we should say that when Pal mentions the Ninth House, everyone looks at Nona, and she doesn't know what the Ninth House is. She's even like, I don't know anyone with more than one house. And Honesty has like a quarter of a house. But her whole body is trembling anyway.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Very interesting. And so Palamedes is about to stick Gideon with a needle to get a blood sample, and woof, Gideon's arm shoots up and grabs Pal's wrist. And on that wrist, Nona notices a funny, fat bracelet, a braided cord of many colors, none of which matched. And, when I first read this, I thought literally nothing of this line.
Yeah, I don't think you're supposed to.
And we'll get to this, I think, in a few chapters from now. But what this basically looks like is a friendship bracelet, one that you might make with your friend when you braid together those little pieces of string.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and the corpse sits up and says, 1, that's not going to work. 2, I fucking hate needles. 3, sex pal. If that's how you get a lady's pants off, holy shit, no wonder I stole your girl. And then Pal says something about like, I never saw, not my girl, I never saw the appeal in an evil cougar.
Good morning, Gideon. And the chapter ends, which we don't know yet, this version of Gideon. So in this like second that I paused between chapter 24 and 25 originally, I was thrilled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But in 25, no break in time, Pyrrha immediately again has her gun out and tells Palamedes to move aside. And Gideon says, "Long time no drown. You're the one who bragged about spading my mum." Gideon is definitely back.
Yeah, Gideon's back. And her like sense of humor is still kind of similar, like just like sarcastic kind of asshole forward humor.
Yeah, with a very bitter and angry bent.
Yes. And Pyrrha is like, "Oh my god, he brought you back. He's made a revenant out of you." And Gideon affirms this.
Yup.
And Pyrrha says, "That's impossible. He shouldn't have been able to separate you. Your girl didn't manage full fusion, but what she took from you, not even John could have gotten back. And he didn't bring you back all the way. He brought you back like this." What is Pyrrha talking about?
There's a lot to unpick here. First of all, I think this is our Happy Meal situation where
Yes.
Pyrrha's kind of like, wait, you didn't fully merge, but Harrow took some stuff from you. So you're not complete. Like, how could John have separated you? And I think I'm not entirely sure like the mechanics of this magically, but it does imply that Gideon is not full. Like, she doesn't have all of herself. Whether the rest of herself is still a part of Harrow, which is currently sitting in Electo's body, or it's in Nona, who knows? And then Pyrrha says, "And he didn't bring you back all the way. He brought you back like this." And I think what she means is that Jod has the ability to resurrect people fully, 100% alive again. And he didn't do that. He brought her back as a revenant.
Right. And what is the difference between like a ghost? He brought her back as a ghost?
Yeah, I guess I don't really know. So maybe it's, you know how there was the tripod thing that they were talking about earlier where you need a body, a soul, and thalergy?
Yeah.
I'm wondering if this is a body, a soul, but not thalergy.
Oh, totally. Yeah, that makes sense.
And the soul is not even complete. So Gideon is dead. She is dead. And that's confirmed in a second. But first, Nona is kind of watching the way that this corpse is moving, and she's fascinated by it. And we don't know why until a little bit later, but it is something to note.
Yeah. I appreciate Crown in this chapter because I see Crown as like all of us. Because Crown's asking all the right questions. She's saying, "I'm so confused. You're actually the ninth, Gideon the ninth. You're what, alive?" Which is like literally what I'm asking myself here. So, and Crown, I mean, I think obviously that's on purpose. But yeah, Crown is the people in this chapter. And if it weren't for Crown, we wouldn't know a lot of things because no one would have asked those questions out loud other than her.
Yeah. So Crown asks Gideon if Gideon is actually alive and actually Gideon. And Gideon says no to both. And she kind of has this whole spiel. She's like, "I'm Prince Kiriona Gaia the First," plus like a slew of military titles. And then she also says she's heir to the Emperor Divine. So Kiriona is just a transliteration of Gideon into Maori, as seen in the Bible. And Gaia, obviously, from John Gaius. She also says she's mega dead.
Yeah. And then says all these assholey, bro-y things. She's like, "Corona looking great, ma'am, may I say." Cam, though probably not for long by the looks of it. Which is
Mumfucker Prime.
Mumfucker Prime. Judith Deuteros for some reason, or like her corpse. And Sex Pal. Oh, and this fake Nona Jessimus over here.
This is so funny to me, especially for some reason, the Judith Deuteros, when she says Judith Deuteros for some reason, because it is kind of like we have all these main characters and then Judith Deuteros is still around.
Totally.
Why?
Totally. Because Corona's in love with her. That's why. That is like the literal only reason.
But I do think it's funny because she doesn't really like drive much in the plot at all in this book until the very end. And it is kind of like, why is she here? Like, she's not doing anything for this book. And I just think it's really funny that Tamsyn here is kind of like acknowledging that, like Judith Deuteros for some reason.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah. And so she also says, Sextus thought you went bang. It's just like so rude. And Palamedes is so patient, so chill as always, and just asks her how long she's been awake. And Gideon's like, whole time I've been playing possum. Pretty clever, right? And Nona's like really annoyed by Prince Kiriona Gaia and is like, you didn't fool me. I knew you were awake. And the prince is like, yeah, congrats. No baby cakes. I didn't fool you. Who is this literal goddamn infant? Can someone give her like a rusk or something and shut her up? I mean, it's like so intense. I was so jarred reading this chapter at first. And now it makes like a lot more sense to me. And I've settled into this needing to be the way it is. But I was so unprepared for this attitude.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, she's mean. She's being cruel.
Yeah.
Gideon was never like a happy-go-lucky, sweet little friendly person. But this is a huge switch just in her demeanor. And Nona is pissed and she opens her mouth to say something horrible. And I think she's not just about to say something horrible. Like, this to me seems like she's about to get all resurrection beast on her in this moment.
Totally.
But no way to tell because Pal gives her a look, so she doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah. And Pal's like, all right. He's, of course, immediately just trying to piece things together, trying to understand, like, how is it possible that Gideon's here? God knows that Gideon is the key to his downfall. So, like, why would he ever let her out? And basically, Gideon snuck on to Ianthe's shuttle and just wanted to get out of wherever the hell they were. And she says all this stuff. And she alludes to the fact that she and Ianthe both dropped into the river to get here, which should be impossible. Think about in Nona the Ninth, Harrow and Ianthe's first journey through the river. We weren't convinced, or no one was convinced that both of them would make it from the first house all the way to God's outpost.
Right. And Gideon is not a lictor, or they don't think she's a lictor, and non-lictors can't survive for more than a second in the river. One other thing in this little bit that I was confused about is Gideon says Ianthe was big pissed that she'd come along and that she shut her off in public. Is that just a figure of speech? Like she didn't allow her to be in public or something? Or does it actually mean Ianthe had the capability somehow to like shut off this revenant in public?
That I have no idea. It is a weird way to word that.
Yeah.
Shut her off in public.
Right.
Because Gideon was in public at that broadcast.
Right, but was sitting there totally still and stoic.
Right, that's true. So, yeah, there might be something to that.
Well, anyway, Gideon says that they must not have been in the river lately, so presumably it's changed. I'm not really sure how the river changing makes it possible for non-lictors to move through it, but in just a little bit, the entire crew is going to go through the river in a truck. So I guess that's true. Like now, whatever this thing with the tower opening and blah, 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 all of that going on has somehow made it possible for normal, mortal, human people to move through the river.
Yeah, which is weird. It'd be like if we were able to just like go to heaven, you know, like be on the way to like hell in our mortal bodies.
Right, right. And Gideon seems to want to go with them to the ninth house, which is weird.
Yeah, and this is really interesting because Pal's like suspicious. He's like, what do you actually want? What do you actually want here? Because Pal's not stupid. He's suspicious, I think, of Gideon. And two, is just like he needs the answers. He needs things to make sense in order for him to move forward. And so Gideon says, well, I don't want much of anything anymore. I just don't really give a shit. I got on Ianthe's shuttle because it looked like it was more fun than standing around at home watching parades and getting saluted. I could kill all you guys and John would probably give me another medal or something. Okay, not you, Kiriona. Ianthe would never shut up about it. I want to go where stuff's happening, and I feel like I've got unfinished business on the ninth. Very cultural, very personal. And Nona immediately is like, she's lying. But Nona can't tell where in this the lie is. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think she wants to go to the ninth house because she suspects that Harrow's soul is there. And yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much it.
I think that the lie is when she says, I don't want much of anything anymore. I just don't really give a shit.
Oh, yeah. 100% that's a lie.
I think that's where the lie is in this.
Mm-hmm.
I think that she does have unfinished business on the ninth. Very cultural, very personal. She's telling the truth there, I think, for the reason that you just stated. And so when Nona calls her out on the lie, wherever it is, Kiriona's like, I thought I told you to shut your stolen goddamn mouth.
Yeah, she's so mad that some other soul is in Harrow's body. Like, really, really mad.
I mean, just think about Gideon's experience right now. Gideon has been fucked over and over and over again her entire life.
Yeah.
And just when she and Harrow start to work well together at the end of the first book, then Gideon sacrifices herself for Harrow, but then wakes up and Harrow's not there at the end of Harrow the Ninth, right? And then it's like, well, fuck, I sacrificed myself for no reason. Then she dies again, and then she gets resurrected as a ghost and is controlled by God. Her body's all fucked up and has been tampered with. And then the one person that she loves in the world or in the universe doesn't exist, right? Or Gideon doesn't know how to find her. I'd be pretty upset too.
Yeah. And I feel like she is still really hurt that Harrow seemingly didn't even want her sacrifice, refused to accept her sacrifice.
She's had no closure here. She can't even confront Harrow. I mean, it's just poor Gideon, you know?
Yeah. And for some reason, in this moment, Gideon, I guess, decides to not be so afraid of needles and allows Cam to try and pierce her with a needle. And it just breaks the needle. And this last little bit is interesting to me because when Cam tries to do this, she sort of staggers back when it doesn't work. And Gideon reaches out to steady her and then kind of flinches away. And you can see that the real Gideon, not that she didn't have trauma when she came to the first house, but the Gideon the Ninth Gideon is still here, still loyal, still cares about these people a lot, would never kill them. She just would not, doesn't want to hurt them. And in a couple of lines later, she looks at Cam and kind of has this moment of humanity where she's like, you'll end up like me if you're not careful. And you can tell that she does want Cam. She's concerned about Cam.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Totally. And so she has this little speech, which reminds me of other speech patterns that both Harrow and Gideon have used, but maybe more a little bit like Harrow, where Gideon says, my father has made my body's bones denser than titanium plex. My father has made my skin turn away bullets. I'm the perfect sword hand and the final expression of the art of the nine houses. Don't you get it? I am the emperor's construct. So she's basically sharing, right, why her body is the way he is. And Pyrrha's like, well, shame he didn't get some spackle for your extra holes, right? And Gideon says, those are my speed holes. They help me go fast.
So stupid.
Oh my God. One more thing to say here before we get to the end is that Camilla asks, what would have happened if she'd actually gotten a blood sample? And Gideon says, well, my blood burns up outside my body, turns to ash. And she says, you need to preserve it to get it out, impregnate it with thallergy to stop the short-term thanergy reaction. When it reacts with air, the preservation rolls backward. It's not static. This language is so out of character for Gideon. She doesn't know anything about necromancy throughout the whole first book. And she doesn't care about it either. And so Palamedes is totally shocked by this. And Nona says it was this that made Palamedes look as though he'd been slapped. I think he's realizing in this moment, this is not the Gideon that he used to know.
Yeah, well, I think the reaction is specifically when she's like, this is Gideon 2.0. I know at least 5 necromancy facts now.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is a reference to a specific thing in Gideon the Ninth, but yeah, I think Pal is like really hurt by this.
Yeah. Yeah. So we move towards the end where they're basically like, Gideon, you can come with us or not. And if Blood of Eden catches you, they're gonna handcuff you and like capture you.
Mm-hmm.
And Kiriona's like, cool, nobody locks me up anywhere.
Right. But while all of this is going on, Nona is having this revelation moment where she just doesn't understand why no one else is noticing that everything about the way that Kiriona is moving, talking, like just little flexions in her voice and in her body, it's very obvious to Nona that she is just like desperately sad. Nona says that she had never seen anyone so sad in her whole short life. It made her nearly afraid to die.
Yeah.
The saddest girl in the world.
Saddest girl in the world. In the universe.
And why is she sad?
Why do you think she's sad, Amy? The love of her life is gone.
Yeah. And in a way, she's kind of gotten everything she ever said she wanted. She's in the cohort. She's someone important's kid. But what she really wanted, what she really wanted was Harrow, this whole time. So,
yeah.
Oh, that wraps up chapter 25.
Yeah. Wow. So many dynamics in those two chapters.
Mm-hmm.
In the next few, we got a lot of action happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A lot of like, rally the troops, here we go. Let's get it started. Gideon's back, but not in the way that we wanted. And yet we carry on.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to the upcoming sort of Rudy, Remember the Titans sports vibes from
Totally.
We Suffer. I love that shit.
Wow, Remember the Titans. That's a throwback.
Yeah.
I bet half our listeners don't even know what that movie is.
Yeah, probably not.
Was that like 2001? I don't know.
Yes. Someone called me an elder millennial the other day, so that was rough.
You're not. We are solidly millennial. Like we are right in the middle of the millennial generation. So,
all right. Well, I just wanted to mention two quick, they're not really audience questions, but things that the audience pointed out. The first one from Val, who says, I think the almond room in The Unwanted Guest is a reference to the amygdala, which is almond shaped and named for that, which is part of the brain. And I thought that this was so smart.
Yeah.
And almost certainly true. So that makes sense. The almond room being the part of the brain, I guess, where they're having this little fight. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
loved that.
Yeah. Val, thank you. And then we had a couple messages, and I'm not sure I got them all, but we had one from Chef and one from Abby. And these messages were pointing out, we had this moment in not last episode, but the episode before, where they're talking about how the light from the resurrection beast is worse when it comes through the eyes. And this like tickles the back of Nona's mind for some reason. And we didn't know why. We were like, what could this possibly be? Sometimes we just get too deep, and we just like miss the obvious answer.
Hey, you know what, Amy, if we got it all, no one would write to us with their insights. So,
That's true. But thank you guys who wrote in saying that what Nona is thinking about is when Honesty was telling her about seeing all those people in the convoy with whited out eyes. Mm-hmm. That's what she's remembering. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is the answer to our big question.
Yeah. But thanks y'all for writing in. It's really fun to read through what you all say. And thanks for your words of encouragement too. Amy, are you reading anything between the last time we talked and shared a whole long list of books to this time?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know you're looking right now in our document of my like 7 books that I listed. I'm just going to mention 2 by the same author that I just read that I just loved, and they're very different from The Locked Tomb, but I thought they were great. Sometimes they're not even in like the speculative fiction section. They're in like the fiction section, which is interesting. But the first book is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. And the second is Piranesi, and they're both by an author named Susanna Clarke. And I just like loved these two books. They're both fantasy-ish. The Jonathan Strange book is kind of like Dickens-ish, but about magicians in England. Anyway, I loved them. I thought they were so well written and very funny. Totally different than like most fantasy that's out there right now. They're often not even in the fantasy sci-fi section. But loved those. I've read a bunch lately, but I'll just say those for now because they were my favorites.
You can save them for next time. I'll share one book which was actually recommended to me by my 13-year-old cousin. I read a lot of YA, and a lot of it is recommended to me by her. And the book is called The Gift That Binds Us. It is book 1 of a trilogy, I think. I'm currently reading the second one, which is very good. And the magic-based system is not like anything wild. What's great about this book, especially for young people who are queer or thinking about queerness, it's just, I read this book and was like, if I had read this book when I was 13, my life would be so different. It's very trans. There's like a little bit of ace woven through it. You know, there's it kind of, these young people are kind of experimenting with their own gender and gender identity, expression, pronouns, talking about it in ways that are really resonant. And not to mention the book is good, like the plot is good as well. But I think the conversations that the main characters are having about gender and sexuality are just so good. And it's so cool that this book exists. So that's The Gift That Binds Us by Carolyn O'Donoghue, who I think is Irish. The book takes place in Ireland.
Nice. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But thanks, y'all, for listening. And thanks for your patience with us as we get back up to it.
Yeah. We'll try and keep things a little bit more regular, although we are nearing the end of the book. So we don't want it to be over too soon. But I think we have a lot of ideas for things that we can do after we finish the book. You know, things like going over the many, many, many audience questions that we haven't been able to get to. Maybe trying to interview some more folks that had stuff to do with the book, you know, stuff like that. So send us any other ideas. We've had some people reach out with some great interview ideas for, talking to themselves or other people in different academic disciplines. Yeah. So definitely stay tuned. Thank you guys so much for joining us for chapter 24 and 25 of Nona. If you have questions or comments or want to point out something that we missed, message us on our website, lockedtombpod.com. As always, if you liked this podcast, tell your friends to listen and rate and review us wherever you're listening to this. And thanks to Olivia K for our theme music. I'm Amy.
And I'm Mel.
And we'll see you next time here at the Locked Tomb Podcast.